Matthew Farwell is indicted in the death of Sandra Birchmore. What does it mean for other cases? Hello, I'm attorney Andrew Myers, and joining me in this episode in which we're going to talk about the Sandra Birchmore case and the indictment of Matthew Farwell is Rosee. Rosee, how are you?
Well, thanks, and you, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me over again.
Well, it's good to see you. You do the beautiful channel True Crime Overtime, and you've been on top of this case from the beginning.
Not from the beginning, but a couple of months ago, I did get into this case. Maybe about a month or two. So a lot of channels are starting to cover it now.
Well, I guess what I meant by since the beginning is that it was the Karen Reed trial that made people start looking, because it was the same. I mean, you're right. The death of this poor young woman was way back in February of 2021. But during the Karen Reed trial, people started looking at this case, at least in the Boston area media, because, it's the same district attorney's office. Some of the same police officers were involved. Let me just ask you initially, in that you had been following it more than me and a lot of other people anyhow, were you surprised when the indictment of Mr. Farwell was announced?
I was surprised. I mean, I expected that there would be movement in the case, but I really didn't think that it would be this soon. And to be honest, I was expecting it to be maybe more than one police officer, so I was surprised of just him.
Well, yeah, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in this episode about what are the ramifications of this. But let's start at the beginning as of the indictment announcement. And here is the U.S. Attorney Joshua Levy announcing the indictment.
The charges filed today in federal court allege that she was in fact murdered by Matthew Farwell 3 days earlier. At the time of her death, Sandra Birchmore was a 23-year-old woman with her entire life ahead of her, and she was pregnant with her first child. We allege that Sandra Birchmore survived years of grooming, statutory rape, and then sexual violence, all at the hands of Matthew Farwell, who was employed throughout their relationship as an officer and then detective for the Stoughton Police Department. And when it became clear to Mr. Farwell that he could no longer control Sandra Birchmore, he allegedly silenced her permanently.
You know what? That's really disturbing to me. I guess one of the initial questions I have is, how is it that this happened in 2021, and here we are in 2024, and it took that long for this indictment to be released? What were your impressions of that, Rosee?
I was also surprised by the amount of time. I think I don't fully understand how the system works there, but I suppose in terms of the federal side taking over, I think that was only a year ago.
Yeah. What happened is that, obviously Sandra Birchmore was found in her apartment February 4th of 2021. And murder is a state charge. Murder is handled on the state level. All 50 states handle it a little bit differently. In Massachusetts, the county district attorney is in charge of prosecuting. It's the local police departments that start the investigation. They, of course, bring in the state police in Massachusetts because the state police have their SERP and other units that come in and investigate and develop the evidence. But when the evidence was disclosed in this case, as you know well, the coroner's office, for whatever reason, ruled that it was a self-inflicted death. And that stood for the longest time. So when a lot of noise was made over the fact that her family hired their own pathologist who said, nuh-uh, it was not self-inflicted, it was a homicide, things heated up. Now, the states have primary enforcement, priority over, convictions, or I should say prosecutions of homicide. It's not the federal government's job. But in this case, the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office went around that, and the indictment doesn't charge Matthew Farwell of murder. It charges him of murdering a potential witness or victim in a case. That's how they got around it.
I see. Okay.
Interesting sidestep. Interesting sidestep. I have no idea how they do it in your country in South Africa. I mean, how is it? Is it as confusing there as it is here in the United States?
Not as confusing, but we don't really have states. We have provinces. So our policing system is our South African police are, they would cover the entire country, and then by law enforcement is another department. So not as complicated at all.
Okay, yeah, under a federalism system, which we could talk about forever, that's the distinction. So something that I think you've noted before, and which I'm thinking, wow, how could it be that the time from the alleged Sandra Birchmore death on February 1st of 2021 to justice, how could it be that it was over a year that Matthew Farwell continued to work at the Stoughton Police Department until he was forced out? It was a year and 2 months. And then from the date of her death until the date of this indictment was 3.5 years. And I think a lot of us are just kind of scratching our heads and wondering, how could that be? You had a couple of notes here that were shocking. Do you want to point that out to us?
Yeah. Okay. So this I don't know if people know, but the motion for detention of Matthew Farwell had quite a lot of information about the text messages that went on between them. So I extracted a little bit from the texts. And one thing that I noted was that Sandra Birchmore was kind of commenting to people about strange behavior of Matthew Farwell leading up to her passing. And a lot of it involved him sort of looking around the areas that would later be a potential crime scene. So she texted a friend. She said, after her friend asked her how it went seeing him, she said, good, but unexpected. So it kind of threw me off and made me a little uncomfortable. But that's because of how things were going. He asked me if I'd give him a key. And he said that if I keep it a secret, he'll be around and see them and all that. So it's somewhere. Then he looked in my closet and then the bathroom, but I don't know why and haven't figured that out. And the closet will be relevant later. So that was quite eerie, which is why I extracted that.
Right. So what had happened is, she had become pregnant and she was thrilled, wasn't she? She was happy. Mm-hmm. She was going to the store and buying baby things and apparently, taking precautions herself personally to ensure the health of the baby. His reaction was the opposite, wasn't it?
It was the absolute opposite. And she was honest with him about trying to become pregnant as well. So it wasn't even that he was hostile, but he was also almost seeming surprised when he shouldn't have been.
Yeah, and that's when things went south. And Jonathan Levy, let's go back to him.
And during that same time, Mr. Farwell was allegedly planning Sandra Birchmore's murder. For the first time, he requested a key to her apartment. And she told friends that he was oddly inspecting the apartment and looking at the closet, including the closet that she was found dead in front of. And then it all came to a head on February 1st, 2021. Mr. Farwell went over to her apartment that evening, and he strangled Sandra Birchmore to death. That's the allegation in this case.
And the other thing, I guess at that point, he was wearing a mask when he went into the apartment. There is video that came out. I mean, there were just so many red flags in this case. Do you want to pick it up? You gave me some notes, and I was remiss. You're the one that pointed out that there is a motion and a memorandum in order to secure his detention, which, by the way, will be heard on September 10th. So I'm the attorney, and I was remiss in not mentioning that a lot of this is based on what was in that motion. And you took a really close look at that motion and made some really good observations. Do you want to share them with us?
Sure. Well, I did note from the text that we extracted earlier that she actually used the word uncomfortable in association with Matthew Farwell, and I think that that is interesting because she was she wasn't quite sure what to make of the situation when he was so hostile to her, and then he moved from being hostile to ignoring her, and then suddenly became, I suppose, what you can describe as unusually nice to her shortly before her passing. And she actually expressed in a text message to a friend that she was uncomfortable by that.
Yeah. And, sadly, she had kind of told her friends she didn't know, she was uncomfortable. What happened next?
What the investigator who drafted this motion noted was that they felt that this change in demeanor, in terms of him becoming what she would describe as unusually nice, kind of showed that he was starting to make plans, potentially to do with her passing, because it was described as possibly trying to appease her, and that at the same time kind of gave him access to do these strange things like look at the closet and all of that. But it was noteworthy to Sandra that he was being nice because she mentioned it in text. So it's quite sad that she even felt the need to point that out, that he was actually being nice to her all of a sudden.
It sounds like a real passive aggressive kind of conduct that he had had. They had this improper relationship from the time that she joined the Explorers, way back when she was 12, the Stoughton Police Department Explorers. You've given a lot of background. We've given a lot of background in our previous episodes, but some of the background is that she joined this Explorers group way back when she was 12 years old, and they groomed her. And Matthew Farwell, was having inappropriate physical contact with her starting when she was 15, and that continued for years. And I don't know, to me it just seems really hard to believe that that went on for so many years. Trying to bring up another slide that I had here. It took so long. It took so long for this to come to justice, but some of the data that was used by federal law enforcement, initially, I guess, by the state, but then picked up by the federals, was Sandra Birchmore's cell phones and 2 Apple iPhones, Farwell's personal cell phone, Stoughton PD issued cell phone. So Farwell had 2 phones, both his personal cell phone and the police department's cell phone. Interestingly, as I noted here, Farwell searched can delete message be recovered by Celebrite. So he's a law enforcement officer. He knows about all this stuff. He knows about Celebrite, which we've seen in tons of other cases. And so he actually did a search, geez, if I delete a message, can Celebrite find it? And without getting into the weeds of that, it's just astonishing that there were so many red flags in this case, Rosee. On January 20th, weeks before she died, a Birchmore friend apparently called the Stoughton Police Department disclosing this long-time inappropriate relationship to an employee of the Stoughton Police Department. Some of these inappropriate physical encounters occurred during Matthew Farwell's working hours. How could it be, Rosee, that they were, having this inappropriate physical relationship during his working hours, as was pointed out, it was on the clock. I mean, I don't even understand how that happens. Do you?
Not at all. And honestly, I mean, I know it seems like a small detail, but it shows that he was being paid for that time to commit a crime instead of fight crime. Completely backwards.
Yeah. What I don't understand, because by the way, there were some other cases. There was a case some time ago, a decade and a half ago, in the Merrimack Valley, of a police officer allegedly having inappropriate physical relations in a police cruiser. But that case came to justice fairly quickly. So I just don't understand how it is. I always thought that police officers were fairly well monitored by dispatch. I mean, you come in the beginning of the shift, you get a little bit of a pep talk, look out for this, look out for that. Matthew Farwell, then went out in his cruiser, and I was always inaccurately, apparently, under the impression that your superiors pretty much know where you are. There's a suspected break-in on Main Street. Go down there. Oh, you're on your lunch break. Okay, you've got an hour to go over to the pizza shop. But dispatch knows that you're at the pizza shop in case there's something going on near there. So that was my impression, and I've known law enforcement officers over the years, and I personally do not understand how a police officer on duty in a town paid for cruiser could just disappear, and that this alleged conduct took place. It makes no sense to me. Does that make any sense to you?
No, I mean, I was under the exact same misconception. I mean, I don't understand how it's even possible, because surely everything that he does should be accounted for. That was part of why I was so surprised, that there weren't more people pointed out in this. I don't know if I should say that, but I kind of felt like it was unusual that he was able to just get away with so much.
Yeah, and not only that they didn't catch it at that time in real time, it's just unbelievable to me. But then there was that phone call that a friend of hers made to the Stoughton Police Department just weeks before she had her life terminated, and that didn't raise some eyebrows. And so it seems
Right.
to me that, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was agreeing.
It just seems to me that there were a lot of opportunities for this to be brought to justice much quicker. And here's the real question. This is a horrible case, and we're absolutely not going to minimize it, but what's next? Do you have questions, Rosee?
I do. I have a lot of questions, especially in terms of what was looked at in this case as well, like the Explorers program, and how this relates to other things involving the medical examiner and all of the officials around that particular department or area.
Yeah, and what about, as you've pointed out in your episodes that you've done, what about Matthew Farwell's twin brother, William Farwell? What about Robert Devine? He was the supervisor of the Stoughton Police Department Explorers program, and he was said to be having inappropriate, both of these people, I should say, were suspected of having inappropriate physical relations with Sandra, starting when she was 15 years old. What about the Karen Reed case? That's when the public's attention really came to light, when it was brought to light that some of the same investigators that, and I'll say it, blew the Karen Reed case, and they did blow the Karen Reed case because they came up with whatever theories and evidence they had, and they did not get a conviction on it, and now it's going up on appeal, and now it's going to have a retrial. So yes, law enforcement blew the Karen Reed case. So what's going to happen with that? At the end of his press conference, Joshua Levy said that he's handing this evidence off to the state. But a lot of reporters at the end of that press conference started asking questions about what the feds are doing, and he kind of did you get the same sense he was backing away from those questions?
Yes, I think, and I felt like he expected them, and he was just ready to say, "We're focusing on the Birchmore case," but he didn't seem surprised at all. But he also he didn't want to go there.
No, he didn't. But who did kind of sort of go there was a retired Massachusetts Superior Court Judge, Jack Lew, who's now a professor at UMass in Lowell, Massachusetts. Massachusetts Superior Court Judge Jack Lew, retired, called the federal indictment an unfriendly takeover, going to the point that you were just making. And a direct quote from retired Superior Court Judge Jack Lew is, "The federal government has stepped in because the state authorities at best made a big mistake." And I thought it was pretty noteworthy that a Superior Court judge would actually say that, because, I don't know. I've been in the Superior Courts in Massachusetts a number of times. I've been before the Superior Court judges, and I think judges are generally very reluctant to comment about stuff. They can't talk. I mean, if there's a case ongoing in front of a judge, they can't go to the media about that. And so, generally speaking, they're kind of reluctant to really get into what's going on a case. So I thought it was very noteworthy that a retired Superior Court judge in Massachusetts, said it looked like almost a hostile takeover of the state. So I don't know. Rosee, why don't we actually take a look at the motion and memorandum in support of the pretrial detention? This is a document that was just disclosed, and it has a lot of, I've got to say, sordid detail. And we'll pick it up where we just were in our discussion. And Sandra Birchmore was ecstatic, really, that she was pregnant. On December 28th of 2020. She sent Farwell a text message informing him that she was pregnant. She sent him a photo of a poster that she had made, and there it is. It's right in the motion. His immediate response to Birchmore's disclosures about the pregnancy was, "I literally have nothing to say right now. How could you express that in text when I said I don't appreciate it?" Farwell and Birchmore then argued about the pregnancy in the following text. They went back and forth. And, we don't need to go into all the details. After the conversations that they had, Birchmore threatened to expose the truth about his prior inappropriate physical relationship with her and their ongoing relationship. And that's where the physical violence picked up.
I think at the beginning of the press conference, it was noted that Matthew Farwell was sort of starting to possibly feel like he was losing control of Sandra Birchmore. And I think that was kind of referring to the fact that she was making these threats to expose him for things that he had done. But what was really important about this document that I thought was, when we look back on this case, there's been a lot of information that's come out about the Explorers program and about instances of grooming and how this relationship actually started and became possible. But there hasn't been a lot of information about the actual instances of DV in their relationship. And I think that looking through these texts and seeing, some of the things that Sandra was saying about feeling uncomfortable and stressed, that really does sort of show you the extent to which that this relationship was also characterized as a DV relationship, in addition to being started by that grooming.
Yeah, and as it points out here, paragraph 49, at least 3 witnesses have disclosed that in the weeks before her death, Birchmore told them that Farwell was physically violent when she and Farwell discussed the pregnancy. And really notable to me from the very beginning, according to the death records, Birchmore was 4 feet 10 inches tall. That's petite. That's really petite. And military records indicate that Farwell was 6 feet 4 inches. That's a big guy. There's a really huge difference in size between a 6'4" man and a 4'10" woman, 23 years old at the time of her death. One of the informants that the U.S. Attorney's Office has identified as Person 2, who I believe was a friend of hers who wanted to remain anonymous. Person 2 reported that in the weeks prior to Birchmore's death, she was over the moon about her pregnancy. According to Person 2, Birchmore had decreased her coffee consumption, discussed winter clothes for her future baby, and engaged in FaceTime calls with her friend while selecting baby clothes. Person 2 indicated that Birchmore was nervous about telling Farwell about the pregnancy, but that she did eventually tell him. In January 2021, Birchmore called person 2 and stated that after telling Farwell about the baby, Farwell told her that he wished she would just die and he wants nothing to do with the baby. Oh my gosh. So it goes from one extreme to the other. According to the information Birchmore shared with person 2, Farwell put Birchmore in a headlock and grabbed her cell phone from her hand. Person 2 told Birchmore to distance herself from Farwell, given that he was dangerous, a police officer, and obviously did not care about the law. However, person 2 was also aware that Birchmore appeared to be attached to Farwell because he had taken her V when she was 15 years old. Person 3 indicated that in the days before her death, Birchmore disclosed that Farwell had been violent. This is what you were talking about. Approximately 10 days before her death, Birchmore and person 3 went to Walmart to buy a baby stroller for Birchmore's future child. Birchmore was excited about the baby and asked person 3 to be the child's godmother. Birchmore told person 3 that the day before, Farwell had gotten angry with her for showing him a fetal sonogram. According to Birchmore, Farwell told her, quote, "That's not my child. I don't want anything really to do with you," unquote. And then Farwell pushed her to the ground. A pregnant woman pushed her to the ground. Person 3 told Birchmore to end the relationship with Farwell. Person 3 indicated that Birchmore seemed scared but not ready to leave Farwell because Farwell had been such a big part of her life for several years, I should say. Additionally, person 7, Birchmore's longtime therapist, reported that in the weeks before Birchmore's death, Birchmore reported to her that Farwell got upset about the impending pregnancy and shoved her. So, in addition to these descriptions of Farwell's violence targeting Birchmore from person 2, person 3, and person 7, Birchmore's text messages to person 1 further confirm Farwell's escalating violence. On January 10th, 2021, Birchmore sent person 1 a text message indicating that she had recently argued with Farwell. Birchmore told person 1 that during the argument, Farwell took her cell phone out of her hand 3 times and refused to give it back to her. Birchmore also indicated that Farwell took her computer out of her hand and used his body to shove her. Oh, good grief. And this is really hard to read for me. I mean, in retrospect, one would say, why wouldn't she leave him? But I guess that's easy for me to say, isn't it, Rosee?
Yeah, I think that it does highlight, these patterns of abuse where, and of course, the fact that she had been groomed by him for such a long time, it's almost like she really just didn't know what was normal. But for the people around her, and coming back to, your much earlier point of this having taken so long after her passing to come to this kind of indictment, I mean, there was cause for concern for an investigation, especially after her passing. I think that these are all signs.
Why? I don't get it. When there's a young woman who's deceased, why is there such an effort to cover up? And I guess it's more of a rhetorical question than anything else. I mean, there's a young woman who's passed away. He had apparently gone into her apartment in advance, as you pointed out, and checked the place out, checked the closets, checked the bathroom. And, she thought it was odd, but she had no idea that he was actually planning her demise.
Yeah. And I think that these were really all signs. And I think that she, with the position that she was in and her level of vulnerability to him, she just, she wasn't able to see it clearly, but it probably was notable.
And who am I as a man to say anything about the state of mind of a young woman, 23 years old, who's now pregnant for the first time in her life? God knows how traumatic and life-changing that is. But I mean, she's happy. We showed earlier the poster that she made. She's thrilled. She's happy. And to be facing all of this, it's it's beyond me to understand. So I guess they were negotiating, what they were going to do, how they were going to do it. Text messages from January 3rd, 2021 showed that Birchmore asked Farwell if their child could have his last name. However, he told her he would not discuss that issue via text message. What does that tell you? He knows that stuff he says is going to be recorded, and he doesn't want what he says to be verifiable later on.
Yeah. And there was a notable change in his texting behavior at some point. He really did start to kind of ignore her, which I mean, I also think is definitely worth noting, especially around discussions of the birth certificate and stuff that she wanted to talk about, and he just kept, negating that.
Yeah, he ignored it. So she says, so I have a compromise for you. You don't need to sign the birth certificate if the baby can have your last name. He says, not discussing it in text. We can talk in person. So like you say, he's ignoring the whole thing. In another text message on January 6th, she began to ask Farwell what their family would look like. One, you don't have to sign the birth certificate if I'm allowed to at least list you and they can have your name and I won't move to Stoughton or the town where his family resides. Birchmore, too. I won't complain about the holidays, but I would like you to come a few days before Christmas and Easter so you can see what they get from me, and I don't want you to leave them out. And 3, if you want to try and support them, we can talk about that, but I do want you to see them. Birchmore, I feel like I'm trying to be as fair as I can, and I want you there for labor. That I'm standing my ground on. Birchmore, last name, Farwell. Okay, we can discuss this more in person. So, he's just blowing her off. Okay, I figured. Does it kind of sound okay to you? It's a lot to think about, he says. It's so much more than you have ever asked for, Birchmore, and still less than what any other girl would ask for. So I pointed this out before, that there was an informant that was ignored on January 20th, 2021. Person 2 called the Stoughton Police Department, and in that call referenced the inappropriate physical relationship between Birchmore and Farwell. After learning about this call, the fact of which suggested at least some aspect of Farwell's illicit conduct may have been exposed to the Stoughton Police Department. Farwell sent Birchmore text messages revealing his extreme anger. He sent her a series of text messages with expletives, telling Birchmore that he thought no one knew about their relationship, that she had no clue how bad this was, and indicating that he does not know if he needs to worry about other disclosures. Before I go on, I've got to wonder about the internal workings of the Stoughton Police Department when someone called and spoke to someone in the department and word got back to Farwell. But my question is, did the word get up to the administrative level or the internal affairs people? I mean, every police department does have an internal affairs department. So how is it that this tip off to the inappropriate physical relationship got into the department and got to Farwell? But who else did it get to? Did it not get to someone in a position of authority to say, hey, wait, stop, this is something that needs to be looked into now? So I just,
yeah, one would expect. Sorry.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
No, I just said like one would expect that it would go to through the correct channels and not go to literally the person being implicated in the phone call.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, how is it? It just seems like there was a culture of let's deal with this problem. Don't let the higher ups find out. It's so, then we get into some crazy stuff. Farwell calls her dude and says, dude, your effing friend called my job, Sandra. WTF? Birchmore question. Farwell, your friend just called my F work to complain about me. WTF? And Birchmore's like, I don't know. Farwell, what do you mean you don't know? Birchmore, I literally just woke up. Farwell, did you steal from her? Nope. What's going on? You also told me that no one knew about us yet. She claimed that we are having an inappropriate physical relationship. So this call went in. This call goes in, and it enrages. I mean, as you pointed out before, Farwell's already angry. Then he pulls back and he's ignoring her. Now it's like, I think it's beyond anger. I think he's enraged at this point. He's just totally enraged. The last part of this text is Farwell: I literally can't believe this is even real life. Like, what else do I have to worry about now? Which other friend will do something tomorrow? So, it's beyond me. I guess the last part of this, looking into the internal things that are going on in the Stoughton Police Department. During this investigation, I have interviewed person 5, an employee of the Stoughton Police Department, who received the call from person 2 on January 20th, 2021. Person 5 indicated that she took down person 2's name and information and gave it to Farwell. Why didn't, like you just said, why didn't they give it to the higher ups? They gave it to Farwell. And Farwell immediately got angry and pissed off and ordered person 5 not to speak about this to anyone and never to talk about it again. Person 5 described Farwell's reaction as atypical and not consistent with his normal behavior. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if maybe that person was also like, maybe he just came on too angry. Maybe that person was afraid. I don't know.
Could it be that there was just a culture, this type of conduct within the police department, that this was well known, and a certain cadre of internal police officers decided, let's do what we can to do damage control? Or is it possible that maybe the message was taken by one of these other people, William Farwell or Robert Devine? Is it possible these messages were even taken by either Robert Devine or William Farwell? I mean, I don't know.
Of course, it's not impossible. We can't know.
On February 4th, 2021, Canton police officers conducted a well-being check at Birchmore's apartment. One of Birchmore's co-workers called the police because Birchmore had failed to show up for work that day. When officers arrived, they found Birchmore's body seated on the floor in a reclined position with a duffel bag strap tied around her neck. That strap was connected to her closet doorknob, the closet that Farwell had inspected approximately 1 week earlier. At least one first responder quickly concluded that Birchmore had been deceased for days. So it seemed to me that Farwell, kind of would have allegedly known that she would not be missed for a couple of days because a blizzard was coming in. And a blizzard was coming in. I understand that the way she was found is really rare. It's really a rare way for a person to terminate their own life. And I question that the Stoughton, actually it would have been the Canton Police Department. I really question that the Canton Police Department, allowed such shoddy work that they agreed that it was a suicide. I mean, I don't know.
I honestly don't. Especially if you've read through some of the things that suggest the complete opposite in this document, I don't really see how they would have come to that. From reading this, there were signs that it was not self-inflicted. I don't understand. I don't understand why it took getting a private assessment by the family to even suggest that this could have been something, not self-inflicted.
Yeah, the coroner's office came up with that conclusion, but it really doesn't seem that it's supported by the actual evidence. And don't forget that some of the same people that were involved in the Karen Reed debacle were involved here. For example, Sergeant Lank was there, and Michael Proctor took part, and others that were involved. And we all know that the Karen Reed case is a debacle and has the trial didn't go well for the Commonwealth. They had problems. So talking about You were talking about the evidence on the scene. The pathologist, the medical examiner, performed an autopsy on Birchmore's body. The medical examiner determined that Birchmore's cause of death was asphyxia by hanging. The medical examiner ruled Birchmore's manner of death as suicide, despite everything that we just said. The medical examiner's written autopsy report noted that Birchmore's hyoid bone, a U-shaped bone at the front of the neck, was fractured on the right side, and that she suffered from a petechial hemorrhage of the bulbar and palpebral conjunctive. Additionally, the medical examiner concluded that Birchmore had a hemorrhage of her left sternothyroid muscle. So now her family hired their own pathologist, and he said, no, it was a homicide. In this document here, paragraph 83, as part of this investigation, the government retained Dr. William Smock as an expert to independently review the crime scene photos, autopsy photos, and the medical examiner's autopsy report. Dr. Smock is an emergency medicine residency and forensic fellowship trained physician with more than 40 years of experience in the forensic evaluation of injuries, crime scenes, forensic evaluation and reconstruction of wounds. His training and experience as a police surgeon, instructor at the Louisville Metro Police Academy, etc., qualifies him to take a look at this case. And based on his review of the evidence, Dr. Smock has made several observations and conclusions that call into question the prior finding that Birchmore's cause of death was suicide, and instead further confirm that Birchmore's cause of death was homicide. And they go into the details of it. So, two different reviews, not just one, but two different reviews after the coroner that the state had used in Massachusetts concluded that it was homicide.
That's very true. I mean, that's confirmation of each other.
Oh, surprise, surprise. Massachusetts State Police interview of Matthew Farwell on February 6, 2021, 2 days after the police found Birchmore's body in her apartment. Massachusetts State Police detectives interviewed Farwell. The interview occurred in the parking lot of a Stoughton elementary school. During this interview, Farwell made several false statements about his relationship with Birchmore. He told officers that he was involved in an inappropriate physical relationship with her, but he claimed the relationship only began in 2020. Based on this investigation, Farwell's statement to detectives was false. As described above, Farwell began having inappropriate physical relations with Birchmore in 2013 and continued until just before her death. So, you know what? I'm just wondering, there's going to be a hearing on this. This is a motion for support of pretrial detention. Mr. Farwell was taken into custody the same day that the indictment was announced, and apparently he was driving a pickup truck. He was driving a dump truck in Revere, Massachusetts. Stoughton and Canton, by the way, are south suburbs of Boston, about 35 minutes south of the city, depending on what you consider the city. And so the arrest warrant went out, and he was arrested in Revere, which is just north of the city. And he was brought in, and he pleaded not guilty. And so he's being detained temporarily until the actual hearing on the 10th of September. I anticipate certainly that with all of the evidence that we see here, including the false statements that were made by Mr. Farwell, I would certainly anticipate that he will be detained. I don't know. Do you have a different opinion on that, Rosee?
Nope. I definitely agree with you on that.
So I don't know. My conclusion is that this is, something that the federal government really had to kind of dance around legally. They it's not the federal government's place to indict for murder. That's the state's role, but the state screwed up. Even in the words of a retired Superior Court judge who said, this appears to be a hostile takeover. So the federal government finessed the law, and they didn't indict Mr. Farwell on murder. They indicted him on murder of a potential witness or victim of a crime. So, I guess the next question is, and we pointed this out before, but concluding here, I guess the next question is, where is this investigation going to go? And you've done a lot of research. Do you have any insight on this?
I think that it would they would have to try and look into how he got away with this, especially, for so long, like how he almost got away with this. I think that is a question that a lot of people are going to have. So, I know that the investigation is ongoing, but that would be my first query on where this is going to go from here.
Yeah, how is it that something like this happened? The investigation appears to be extremely flawed. It was about 1 year and 2 months between the time of Sandra Birchmore's death and the time that Matthew Farwell was terminated from the Stoughton Police Department. What happens that it takes that long? And then what happens that it takes that long for a federal indictment? It would seem to me that, but for the fact that the federal government stepped in, that he would have gotten away with this. That's what it appears to me. And so I am anticipating highly what's going to happen with the Karen Reed case, because certainly it's an understatement to say that there were some irregularities in that case with 74 witnesses, 6.5 weeks of, actually 2.5 months of testimony, over 600 exhibits. And it would seem that any objective observer of the Karen Reed trial would say that the witnesses of the state, the Commonwealth's own witnesses, were turned around largely by the defense. And so I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. What's going to happen with Robert Devine? What's going to happen with William Farwell? What's going to happen with the Karen Reed case? So I guess the best we can say in concluding this is, we're all waiting for the other shoe to drop. Rosee, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I think I also just wanted to note that, from reading this document, I think that the investigation that was done federally was really thorough, and it was really, really well put together once they stepped in. So I just think that, thank goodness for that. And
it was really well done. It was really thorough. It was about 65 pages of an affidavit and also the memorandum itself. It was very thorough. It was very well written, and it went into a lot of detail that we've only touched on here. So we'll make sure that we put a link to that down below. But Rosee, you've done a lot of work on this case, and so I've got to thank you for doing that. Keep up the good work, and thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Whether you are in the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere else, please remember to be kind to people. You don't know what they're going through. And the same goes for our comments section. We want you to comment, but be nice, be kind, be positive if you can. And thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one.